I was pressing my navy dress, the one with tiny flowers my son always said made me look distinguished, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Robert, my attorney of 15 years. "Call me immediately." Robert never contacted me outside office hours, not unless something was very wrong. My stomach dropped as I dialed his number. What he told me in the next 5 minutes changed everything. By the time I hung up, I was sitting frozen on the edge of my bed, my dress crumpled on the floor. Within hours, I would be standing in my son's driveway, knowing that his picture-perfect marriage was about to shatter, and I would be the one holding the hammer. 6 months earlier, I'd thought I was the luckiest mother-in-law in America. My only son, James, a 42-year-old consultant, had finally found love with Cassandra, a charming pediatric nurse who seemed to adore both him and his old-fashioned mother. Cassie called me Mom Thompson with such genuine affection that it melted the loneliness I'd carried since my husband's death 15 years earlier. When they asked me to sell my house to help fund their dream wedding, I hadn't hesitated. I'd raised James in that house, tended the garden through every season, nursed my husband in the upstairs bedroom as he faded away. Selling it was like cutting away part of my past, but they promised I'd always have a place with them. "You'll never be alone again," Cassie had said, her hazel eyes wide with sincerity. I gave them $50,000 from the sale proceeds. $35,000 went toward the wedding, which cost nearly $47,000. The rest, Cassie assured me, would go toward home improvements and shared expenses. I believed every word. That afternoon, Robert's voice on the phone was tight. "Margaret, I need you to sit down. This is about Cassandra." I blinked. "About my daughter-in-law." "What about her?" There was a pause, the kind that makes your heart pound harder with every second. "She isn't who she claims to be." The words felt like smoke from a fire I couldn't yet see. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Cassandra Williams doesn't exist," Robert said. "At least not the version your son married. There is no record of her ever working at Children's Hospital, no trace of her Colorado childhood, no documentation of her parents' deaths." I laughed nervously, insisting there must be some mistake. Cassie had been part of my life for more than a year. She'd baked cookies with me, decorated my Christmas tree, cried when James surprised her with a proposal. But Robert's investigator had been thorough, and the conclusion was unavoidable. My son had married a woman living under a false identity. Robert's advice was firm. Get to James's house immediately, don't call ahead, and don't warn Cassie. I drove with white knuckles gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. When I pulled into their driveway, their house looked perfect in the evening light. Fresh landscaping, warm kitchen glow, the kind of house a mother dreams her son will one day own. Through the window, I saw them moving around the kitchen, laughing, preparing dinner for me. For a moment, I almost turned around. What if Robert was wrong? But deep down, I knew he wasn't. James greeted me at the door with his usual bear hug, but I noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. Cassie followed, wearing a floral apron over designer jeans, her smile as warm as ever. She offered me wine, chatted about her famous lasagna, and for a moment I doubted everything I'd heard. But as I stepped into the living room, I noticed something chilling. The entire house was decorated in Cassie's taste, neutral colors, abstract art, sleek furniture. Nothing of James remained. No football memorabilia from his college days, no antique clock his father had left him, not even the painting he'd begged me to save from our old house. It was as if she'd erased him from his own life. When James suggested we check out his new office setup, I seized the opportunity. Once the door was shut, I asked him quietly how much he really knew about Cassie's past. The look on his face nearly broke me. Relief. It was as though he'd been waiting for someone to say the words out loud. "She says she grew up in Denver, lost her parents in a car accident when she was 25, he said. "But now that you're asking, I've never seen photos. Never met a friend from that life." I showed him Robert's messages. As he read them, the color drained from his face. Before we could say more, Cassie called cheerfully from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready." But when we walked back down the hall, I caught sight of her in the doorway. She wasn't smiling now. She was standing perfectly still, watching us, her expression calculating. Cassie's cheerful voice had vanished. She stood by the kitchen counter, one hand resting on the edge as though bracing herself. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. James opened his mouth, closed it again. I stepped forward. "We need to talk," I said quietly. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance, fear, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Sure," she said, slipping the apron over her head and folding it neatly. "Let's talk after dinner." "No," James said, his voice firmer than I'd heard in months. "Now." For a moment no one moved. Then Cassie smiled, but it was a smile I'd never seen before, tight, almost mocking. "Fine," she said, gesturing toward the dining table. "Let's sit." We sat across from each other, the lasagna untouched on the table between us. Cassie rested her chin on her hand, studying me like a cat studies a cornered mouse. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" I glanced at James. His hands were clenched on the table, his knuckles white. "Your past," he said finally. Cassie laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "My past? What about it?" "There's no record of you working at Children's Hospital," I said carefully. "No record of your parents or your life in Denver." Her smile faded. "So you hired someone to dig through my life?" she said, her voice suddenly cold. "That's invasive, Margaret." "You married my son under a false name," I said. "That's more than invasive, it's fraud." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she sat back, crossing her arms. "Fine. You want the truth. Here it is. Cassandra Williams isn't my birth name. I changed it 10 years ago to get away from a past I didn't want anymore. I didn't tell James because I knew you'd both judge me." "What past?" James asked, his voice hoarse. Cassie's gaze shifted to him, and for the first time that night, her composure cracked. "One I was ashamed of. My real name is Amanda Collins. I grew up in foster care. I lied about Denver about my parents because I didn't want to scare you off. I wanted a chance to build something new." James looked stricken. "You didn't have to lie, Cassie. I would have loved you anyway." Her eyes flashed. "Would you? You with your perfect family dinners and your perfect little house, you have no idea what it's like to claw your way out of nothing. To have no one. I made myself into someone you could love." Her words hit me like a stone because part of me understood. I had been that girl once, scraping by, desperate to be seen, but the lies were too big to ignore. "You took my money under false pretenses," I said quietly. "Money I gave you in good faith." Cassie's eyes narrowed. "You offered it. I didn't hold a gun to your head." James stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough. This isn't about money anymore. It's about trust. And right now, I don't know if I can trust you." Cassie's face hardened. "So what? You're going to throw me out? Start over?" "I don't know," he said, his voice breaking. "But I know we can't go on like this." She looked at him for a long moment, then at me, her expression unreadable. Finally, she stood and walked toward the hallway. "I need air," she said, her voice flat. "Don't follow me." We listened to the sound of the front door closing. The house felt suddenly huge and empty. James sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. "She lied to me, Mom," he whispered. I put my hand over his. "Yes," I said softly, "but she also told the truth tonight. That counts for something." He looked up at me, his eyes red. "What do I do?" I squeezed his hand. "You give her a chance to make it right, and if she doesn't, you walk away." Cassie didn't come back that night. James sat in the kitchen until well past midnight, staring at the cold lasagna as if it held answers. I stayed with him making tea we didn't drink, speaking little. Every sound outside made him flinch, the distant bark of a dog, a car door slamming down the street, but no footsteps ever returned. When the sun came up, I found him asleep at the table, his head resting on his folded arms. I touched his shoulder gently. "She's not coming back," he murmured without opening his eyes. "She might," I said, "but if she does, it has to be on different terms." He nodded, but I could see the wall going up behind his eyes, the same wall he'd built as a teenager after his father's death. I wanted to pull it down brick by brick, but I knew better. This was his to face. Cassie returned late the next afternoon. I heard the car door first, then the sound of the front door opening and closing. She walked into the kitchen slowly, like someone bracing for impact. James was on his feet before she could speak. "Where were you?" he demanded. "In a motel," she said simply. "I needed to think." "And?" Cassie set her keys on the counter and met his gaze. "And I've decided to tell you everything. No more half-truths, no more fake backstories. You deserve to know who you married, even if it means losing you." James's face was unreadable. "Then tell me." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "My real name is Amanda Collins. That part I told you. What I didn't tell you is why I changed it. When I was 19, I was arrested for check fraud. It was stupid, desperate. I was trying to pay rent, keep the lights on. I served 6 months, got out, and swore I'd never go back to that life. Changing my name was the only way I could get a fresh start." James's jaw tightened. You've been lying to me since the day we met." Cassie's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "Yes, because I didn't think you'd see me as anything but a criminal. I didn't think you'd ever believe that I'm not that girl anymore. You could have told me," he said, his voice raw. "We could have faced it together." Her laugh was short, bitter. "You think it's that simple? People don't forget. They don't forgive. I was terrified of losing you." James turned away, running a hand through his hair. I watched him struggle between anger and love, between the man who had trusted her and the man who now knew everything. Finally, he faced her. "I don't care about your name or your record. I care that you lied. Every time you looked me in the eye and told me a story about a childhood that never existed, you chipped away at what we had. I don't know if I can get that back." Cassie's shoulders sagged. "I know. I'll leave if that's what you want." He stared at her for a long time, then shook his head. "No. You stay. But things change starting now. No more lies. No more secrets. If you want this marriage, you fight for it honestly this time." Her breath caught. "You still want me?" "I want the truth," he said. "And if you can give me that, maybe we can find our way back." Cassie nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Then I'll tell you everything. Not just the bad stuff, the good too, the parts I was too scared to share." For the first time in days, James's expression softened. He stepped forward, took her hands in his. "Then we start over. Tonight. Just you and me." She nodded again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want that." I slipped quietly out of the kitchen, leaving them to their fragile reconciliation. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that, but for the first time there was a path forward. Sometimes I thought as I walked onto the porch, love isn't about starting fresh. It's about digging through the wreckage together and choosing to rebuild. 3 months later, the house was quiet. I was packing away dishes after Sunday dinner when James stepped onto the porch with me, his hands in his pockets. He didn't look sad, not exactly just settled. "Cassie moved out last week," he said quietly. I nodded, waiting. "She said she needed to find out who she was without the lies. I told her I needed to figure out who I was without the anger." He let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. It wasn't angry this time. We just knew it was time. I put a hand on his arm, feeling the steady strength there. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I'm okay. I think we both will be." We stood there for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon. There was no wedding ring on his finger anymore, but there was something lighter about him, as if laying the truth bare had set him free. Love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means letting go with grace, giving each other the chance to start over. For the first time in months, I felt peace settle over me. Whatever came next, James wasn't broken. He was still walking forward, and so was I.